or two. So I want to welcome you to tell Shiloh this is where the action is. And let's just get one thing out in the open right now. Shiloh matters because the tabernacle was here. That's why we're here. That's why you're here. That's why God hung out here. Does again now with us. This was the center of Israelite life and worship for over 3 centuries. So where was the tabernacle? You may know that I wrote an article about this when we began the dig. And it's available on my academia page, but I theorized about 4 possibilities of where the tabernacle was. The summit of the Tel, just south of where that tower now is, as a possibility. There would be a logic to that. The southern approach, where it's very flat and open, some scholars have thought about that. Where you are right now, Charles Wilson came here in 1866 and measured this northern platform, and which is a rock quarry essentially, and in his view this was a perfect place for the tabernacle. Seemed to him there were like cup marks in the bedrock, maybe where posts had gone and so forth, so he theorized this. Didn't really catch on until the 1980s when an author named Kaufman published an article suggesting again that this may have been the place of the tabernacle. This community here at Shiloh, there's about 5,000 people who live here in modern Shiloh up on the hill. And when their community was established in the late 70s, then they sort of popularized this idea. So there are signs that point people here to the place of the tabernacle, and there will be people coming in here throughout the day, bringing guitars and groups to sing and worship and do different things because they think this was the place. I suggested a 4th possibility was that the tabernacle may have actually been mobile at Shiloh, that it may have been moved from place to place seasonally because, you know, if you're sacrificing a lot of animals when the wind is blowing a certain direction, so it'd be pretty unpleasant, just the realities. I have a friend who runs a slaughterhouse in Central Texas, and every day they cart off an 18-wheeler full of remains. So you can imagine with an ongoing sacrificial system here, how are you processing all of that hygienically and so forth? So those were the things we were thinking about. There is a big bone deposit over on the east side in Area D here that Israel Finkelstein had uncovered when he dug here in the 1980s, and he had found that it was disproportionately from the right side of the animals. More bones were right-sided than left-sided. He thought it was a Canaanite sacrificial system, but it fits perfectly the actual biblical timeline for the Israelites' arrival and the beginning of the sacrificial system. So what he thought had happened was that when the Israelites arrived, in his mind, back then he used to believe there were Israelites, and then they arrived around 1200. Now he doesn't believe that there was an Exodus or that there were Israelites, but what he believed in the 1980s was that the Israelites arrived, they scraped the remains of the sacrificial system off the top and dumped them over here in Area D, and then the tabernacle went on the top. Well, the Danish believed that the tabernacle was on the top too, as the most likely place. Hans Kehr, their dig director. And really I thought that was the most logical place too, and I'm on record as having said that, with caveats that it may have also been mobile and moved around over time. Well, so I was more surprised than anyone when we began to uncover what we are uncovering, and some of you are going to be working on this monumental building here on the northern slope. So let me remind you what Ehud Netzer did at Herodium. For 35 years, he worked at Herodium looking for Herod's tomb, and he started on the top, it wasn't there. They went to the bottom, it wasn't there, and lo and behold, the last place he thought that it would be, which was on the slope, is where they found the tomb of Herod, which of course you can visit today. As I mentioned last night in at least one of the meetings, he actually then died in the very tomb that he'd spent his life looking for. So I was not anticipating here on this northern slope that we would uncover what we did. But in season 1 in 2017, we got a very wide wall, which appeared to be from Iron Age 1, time of Eli, approximately. And each season we've exposed more. Now we have perpendicular walls, we have cross walls, and to make a long story short, this matches the dimensions given in the Bible for the tabernacle, for the Mishkan. and it dates to that time period, and we have cultic material all around it, like a demolished altar, four-horned altar, ceramic pomegranates, which that's a motif of the tabernacle. Remember, on the hem of the priest's garments, they had bells and pomegranates around the base. And the thing is, if you go due east, straight east from that building, you will run into that bone deposit. And so 30, 45 seconds. So if there were a sacrificial system going on, it seems that there was, and they're carrying them outside the camp, so to speak, they're on top of the wall, just dumped right in that area. What we would call a favisa, mixed in with a lot of late Bronze Age pottery from the time of Joshua. The vessels are mendable vessels, so as if they were part of a libation, a drink offering that's poured out, then the vessel itself has value, and so the vessel is broken. And so it's just full of late Bronze Age pottery, full of 7,000 bones last year that we excavated out of that one area. This year we have a zoo archaeologist. For this reason, we're bringing a zoo archaeologist on board this year, full-time with us. He'll arrive next week. Haskell Greenfield from University of Manitoba, and he'll be working very closely in that analysis from the bones from last season and this season. And you're actually looking at the remains, I believe, of the biblical sacrificial system that operated here for over 3 centuries. Now, you're going to see signs as you walk around. The tabernacle stood at Shiloh for 369 years. Well, that's a direct quote from the Seder Olam, which is part of the Mishnah. So that's not a biblical date, that's a Seder Olam date. Now, I think there's a lot of value in the Mishnah, but in this case that doesn't match the biblical chronology. So I will normally say that the tabernacle was here for over 3 centuries, okay? Maybe 305, 310 years, something like that. That's a long time. And when Jerusalem is still a pagan city, if you want to connect with God, you come here to do it. And this is why people like Hannah and Elkanah come here. They seek after God. They connect with God here. And so it's a beautiful beginning of the story. Joshua 18:1 says that Joshua erected the tabernacle at Shiloh. And this is at the end of the conquest, so right around 1400 BC. And then Joshua goes to Timnah, right over here, and that's his hometown. So he lives a long time after this, still when they're here. That excavation just began last year. The excavation of Timnah, Joshua's hometown, by an brilliant young Israeli archaeologist named Davir Raviv. He and I just wrote an article together, and he'll actually be coming by sometime this week to pick up something from me. But he's excavating Joshua's hometown right now. So what we're interested in is a regional view of what's going on. So not just in that one square, or not just in one area or one site, but what's happening here and regionally. So we're comparing pottery and all of our artifacts so that we're understanding regional occupational patterns, okay? Now, the Germans have a big word for this. It's called Heilsgeschichte. It's the work of God's redemption work in history. So we're trying to understand what happened here in biblical times, and we have 9 layers. So as you go, some of you are going to be in brand new squares, so you're going to have maybe a little bit of Islamic material and then Byzantine material, and then you're going to get into late Roman period, and then into early Roman period, into the Hellenistic period, Iron Age 2, Iron Age 1, late Bronze Age, Middle Bronze Age 3, Middle Bronze Age 2. So 9 distinct layers that we have identified that we're going through. Tonight we're going to have a lecture on stratigraphy and why stratigraphy is so important. So every area that you excavate, we call that a locus. And so we pronounce the plural of locus as loci. So when you have a change of soil color, soil texture, a feature emerges like a tabun, an oven, or a wall, we always create a new locus. There's new paperwork that goes with that. Each locus has to then be assigned to a stratum, and then that stratum goes into our strata, our overall plan of the area. So we have cross sections so that everything that gets excavated ultimately goes onto our plan, and we know where it fits into the big picture of things. So your square supervisor will coach you along on that, but I think the most valuable thing that you bring to the table is innocence of eye. you as a first-timer working in an archaeological square, your own common sense, your enlightened common sense is of great value to us. So you may be seeing things that we're not seeing because we're so accustomed to looking at the same thing over and over. So don't ever feel like it's stupid or doesn't make any sense. Give that input. If you see something, we need that. So the site stratigraphy starts in what we would call Middle Bronze Age 2, around 1750 BC. And for about 100 years, there's an occupation here with no wall, no fortification system. About 1650 BC is when the fortification system is built in what we would call MB3, Middle Bronze 3. That's, like I said, 1650 to 1550. There's a big wall there that's 5.3 meters wide that encircles the site. Inside that wall is about 5 acres of real estate. 5.3 meters is big. And there was a mud brick superstructure on top of that, just like at Jericho. You go to Jericho, Shechem, all these fortification systems are built around the same time. And they all had mud brick superstructures on top of them. So you go to Jericho, you hear about the walls of Jericho falling down. Okay, the stone walls of Jericho from the time of Joshua are still standing today. They never fell. It was the mud brick superstructure on top of it. And when it fell out. We dig through 2 meters of mud brick on the inside and the outside here of the collapsed mud brick superstructure. So when it collapsed at Jericho, it fell outward and it created a ramp. And they went up into the city. So who knows what phenomena God used to wipe out the walls of Jericho, but it seems that ours fell about that same time as well. So that gives us a clear distinction or a separation. So Middle Bronze Age 2, people are living here, Canaanites, or the Bible would more specifically call them Amorites. So Amorites are a class of Canaanites, if you will, that live in the central hill country. So fortification system built around MB3. Then we have the Late Bronze Age period where we have the arrival of the Israelites, the very end of Late Bronze Age 1. And the tabernacle is set up here, and the tribal allotments are given out at that time for the 7 tribes that have not yet received their inheritance. So at the entrance to the tent of meeting, which is probably right over here, is where then Joshua gives out those tribal allotments, and the tribe of Dan went, yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, we got to go to the coastal plain, great. So they've then got to go out and deal with their various issues. Joshua continues to be active in governance issues, but of course with the passing of Joshua, then you're moving away from executive leadership into much more decentralized form of government. So after the time of Joshua, you go into Iron Age 1, that's Eli, Samuel's period. The Philistines, 26 miles from here at Ephek or Ebenezer, you have the great battle where the Ark of the Covenant is captured. They take it from Shiloh to the battle against the Philistines over here. And of course they're apostatized essentially at this point. And because of their wickedness, God allows them to be destroyed. The Ark is captured at Ebenezer. A runner comes back to bring news. And I measured it myself. It's 26.2 miles. Get it? He ran 26.2 miles. Okay, so the first so I come up with this great idea for a fundraiser. All right, it's going to be called the Shiloh Marathon. Seriously, so I'm talking about this idea, and guess what? There already is one. So the race ends at the top. So they run, and then the finish line is right up here at the top. So didn't make any money off of it, but it's a pretty cool idea. We have a destruction layer that we excavated. If you're working with Kevin Larson, you'll see that in his square. When we carbon dated that, and then our ceramic date matched that, it dated to about 1075 BC. That's the time of the Philistine destruction. Now, here's where archaeology comes alongside the Bible in a very fascinating way. We don't change the Bible in any way, but we illuminate the Bible. We can set it into a context so that we can understand it better. The Bible doesn't say the Philistines destroyed Shiloh. It says they defeated the Israelites at Ebenezer and at Aphek. The Ark of the Covenant was captured. Eli falls over in the gate, which may be right here where Mark's working. Falls over, breaks his neck, and all of this. Samuel leaves, and it's a tragic time. But it never says that the Philistines destroyed Shiloh. Psalm 78 implies that the Philistines destroyed Shiloh, but you don't know for sure, right? So then here we come along and we excavate, and what do we find? A destruction layer that dates to that time period. So I think you're looking then, this is where it's pretty cool, because now we get more insight into the biblical text, which is super helpful. It's reoccupied pretty quickly in Iron Age too. Now, Israel Finkelstein, who's the most famous minimalist in the world, that means he hates the Bible, excavated here in the 1980s, back when he was at Bar-Ilan University and back when he used to believe something. Since then he's gone to Tel Aviv University and now he's at Haifa University. And he said there was no Iron Age 2 occupation here, but the Bible says there was. In the time of Jeremiah, you've got people living here. Jeremiah 7:12, remember, is our famous verse, and it says, "Go now to Shiloh, see what I did there, and make it known." And so we have a bunch of verses, in fact, in Jeremiah that talk about Shiloh. Iron Age 2, the Bible says they were here. Finkelstein said he excavated and there's no Iron 2. His dump piles were left behind. So old excavations have these huge dump piles. And like, there's a big one right there. We went back and we dry sifted and wet sifted his dump piles. Guess where all the Iron Age 2 pottery is? It's in the dump pile. Okay? Now, I have no idea what anyone's motives are. I'm just telling you what I found in the dump pile. Along with scarabs and bula and stone vessels and hundreds of coins. All this was thrown away as trash, okay? And so methodology has greatly improved in the last 40 years. So I'm saying there was an Iron 2 occupation at Shiloh, just like the Bible says. That 1400 date for this bone deposit that he thought was Canaanite, guess when the Israelites arrived here according to the Bible? 1400, okay? So you have a beautiful synchronism that if you don't take the biblical text seriously, you throw that out and you lose that. And that is a powerful thing when you synchronize and bring about a historicity or a verisimilitude. That's what it's all about. And you want to understand the relationship between the ancient text and between the archaeological material. Anyway, you do have even a bit of Iron Age 3 material here, tiny bit of Persian. And then in the Hellenistic period, things pick back up. And so we've got a good bit of late Hellenistic. That would be, say, 3rd, 2nd century BC. And then in the early Roman period, it's huge. So the whole site is occupied. Finkelstein, in his final report, said that only the south side of the site was occupied, not the north side. You're going to excavate hundreds of pieces of early Roman pottery, that's New Testament period, every single day. It's by far the most occupied time period. So the whole site is occupied at the time of Jesus. And we know Jesus passed right by here. The Bible never says that he went to Shiloh, but we can surmise that he probably did. I mean, his mission was to reach people. If he's passing by and there's a community here, we can surmise, but we can't say for sure that Jesus and the apostles were here. But it was heavily occupied at that time. It's destroyed in the Great Revolt, the first revolt. Last season we have incontrovertible evidence of that. It's destroyed again in the second revolt. We have found more Bar Kokhba revolt material is a big deal. I mean, Israelis love that stuff. And I've just published a new article on this with Davir Raviv. We have more Bar Kokhba coins here than any other site that has been found. Now, part of that is we don't miss anything, okay? You're going to see a metal detector going around behind you at all times, tracking. And if it gets past you and it gets past Ellen, then it's going to go through wet sifting and we'll catch it there. So we have silver and bronze Bar Kokhba coins and other revolt period material. It's very interesting. And then we get into the late Roman period and then into the Byzantine period. Now, bones. We analyze every bone. We analyze every seed. Because these things are talking. There's a language to this. Like, I'm a ceramicist or an expert in ancient pottery. Or as my wife would say, boring. Okay, like, who cares about this stuff? To me, I care because I hear it. I know that language. Jesus said in Luke 19:40 about the stones talking. You know, so I'm hearing a lot of voices. I hear bones. I hear pottery, flint. I'm seeing this overall picture of what happened here. The bones tell us an interesting story. The Canaanite period, that would be our strata 8 and 7, and then the Christian period, that's when you get the Byzantines here. We got 5 churches on site, incidentally, 5 ancient churches. We've got about 4% pig bone. The Canaanites and the Christians are eating pork. And in between there, we've got less than 1%, and what that little amount, it probably is just contamination, just quite frankly. On the other hand, have you ever smelled bacon frying? I mean, could have been some poor Israelite that was more than he could bear, okay? But when you see a big change in the material culture, 4% to 1%, that's a noticeable change. 60% of the bones from the right side, 40% from the left side, and there's tens of thousands of bones. That's not an anomaly. There's an explanation. And of course, you Bible readers, of course, immediately your mind went to Leviticus 7. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Your mind went immediately to Leviticus 7. It says that the right side of the animal is the priest's portion. This is where the Bible comes to play. It's our go-to source in this part of the world. When these artifacts come out of the ground, today you guys are going to excavate about 2,000 pieces of pottery. Wow. Today. You're going to excavate coins today. You're going to excavate stone vessels today. You're going to discover new walls today. You're going to collect bones and all kinds of samples. So all of this stuff we're going to analyze, and it's going to tell us a story of what was going on here. Quite fascinating when we put the whole thing together. But they're silent. They're mute. When they come out of the ground, they can't speak. We have to interpret them. How do we interpret them? Our go-to source in this part of the world is the Bible. Hello. Amen. I mean, if we were excavating in Mesopotamia, then maybe, we've got Ugaritic literature we'd be looking at. We're at biblical sites. Of course the Bible is our source. You start talking about, probably aware we did a project at Mount Ebal recently, and there's a possibility that you guys are also going to be dealing with some Mount Ebal material while we're here as well. But Adam Zertal, the Israeli archaeologist in charge of the Manasseh Hill Country Survey, had never read the Bible, and he's in charge of the Manasseh Hill Country Survey. Can you imagine? And so he doesn't even know what he's found at Mount Ebal. They go a whole season, and he's trying to figure out what it is. And finally, a volunteer, Zvi Konisberg, shows him Joshua chapter 8 and reads it to him, shows him a picture of the biblical altar. Zertal is blown away. And he is sucked into a vortex, and he comes out on the other side as a believer in the historicity of the text. And that's a total secularist. See, he wasn't against it. He'd never even heard it. So welcome to my world, okay? This is that arena of ideas into which we engage. That's what ABR is. That's what we do. That's why we do what we do. And that's why you're here, because you want to engage in that arena of ideas too. And you're going to be a part of something very important, all right? I told you last night that we were going to place you into harm's way. I'm not trying to be melodramatic, but I will quote Henry V. He who sheds his blood with me today, he will be my brother. And so once you go through this, the Israelites all passed through the sea together, and there was a bonding that happened as they became a nation, as Dr. King would say, shared suffering is redemptive, okay? You're going to spill blood, you're going to share suffering together, and you're going to produce something out of that that's very meaningful, that after you're dead and gone, is going to be a permanent record of God's work in history. So then a bond is formed through this process. Think of like boot camp, okay? You're going to go through a process together that you're never going to forget the rest of your life. And when you put down at the end of your life, like, what are the things that you're going to really remember? Like, you were born and you graduated and you got married and you had kids and you had grandkids. And I mean, what are these landmark things? You're going to put this with them. You're going to say, I was part of this and it made a difference. And so I thank you for being here. And I think you're going to have a great time. Our whole team is here to serve you, to make your job easier, to provide you with what you need. And I think that only the people who are supposed to be are here, and that's you. All right? So we're going to play the hand that was dealt us. And so you're the cards there. And so you're the ones the Lord's going to use to do all these great things that are going to happen this week and in the coming weeks. A few more things. We have, of course, east over here. The sun's rising in the east. And usually you have a beautiful view of the sunrise, and it's hazy today. That's west, that's north, that's south. These vineyards across here are growing vines and making wine from grapes that were extinct. We have excavated these seeds. We recovered the seeds through a process called flotation, which you're going to see going on. And that species of extinct grape has been reintroduced. And the vineyards are producing wine that you can buy in the shop here. And that's pretty cool. So we've got like dates growing down in the Jordan Valley from date